In the final days of World War II, the United States faced a decision unlike any other in military history. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 were the result of a moment defined by pressure, responsibility, and the urgent need to end the deadliest conflict humanity had ever known. To do that, a decision had to be made, one of the most brutal and strategic the world had ever seen, designed to force surrender by striking at the very heart of the enemy, Japan. In this video, we reveal how the United States made a strategic choice that reshaped warfare and shifted the global balance of power, ultimately bringing World War II to an end. The political and military context behind this decision shows why American leadership moved faster and further than ever before. But beyond strategy, there was a human reality. Soldiers, generals, and decision-makers all knew the war had to end. The world was exhausted. World War II had already claimed millions of lives and left entire continents in ruins. Europe was devastated. Cities that once stood for culture and progress were reduced to rubble. In the Pacific, the fighting was relentless. Island after island was taken at an extreme human cost. Soldiers pushed through brutal terrain, facing an enemy that showed no intention of surrender. Every victory came at a price. Every advance felt more fragile than the last. Back home, families waited for letters that too often brought grief instead of hope. The weight of war didn't stay on the battlefield. It reached into homes, into ordinary lives, into entire generations. Military leaders understood a harsh truth. Continuing the war the same way would cost hundreds of thousands more lives, possibly even more. Victory was no longer just about territory. It was about how much suffering humanity could endure before it finally ended. The discussions intensified. The options were grim. A full-scale invasion promised fierce resistance and catastrophic losses. Intelligence reports warned it could become the bloodiest chapter in military history. A blockade might weaken the enemy, but would prolong the war and increase civilian suffering. Negotiations seemed impossible after years of brutal conflict. There was no good choice, only choices with consequences. This was where military strategy collided with moral responsibility. Every path forward carried a cost that would echo far beyond the battlefield. Technology had already transformed warfare into something never seen before. Air power, naval dominance, and industrialized armies had redefined destruction on an unprecedented scale. The Allies knew they weren't just ending a war, they were shaping the future of every conflict that would follow. As the debates continued, one conclusion became unavoidable. Prolonging the war would lead to unimaginable loss of life. The question was no longer how to win, but how to end it as quickly as possible. When the final decision was made, it remained highly classified. Only a small circle understood what was about to happen. Preparations were carried out with precision. The operation itself would take only moments, but its consequences would last for generations. The decision to use atomic bombs against Japan was deeply strategic, but it also carried a sense of vengeance, still fresh in American memory after Pearl Harbor. Beyond that, it halted Japanese advances, forced retreats on multiple fronts, and ultimately led to the surrender of the United States' most formidable enemy in the Pacific. The impact was immediate. The global balance of power shifted almost instantly. Governments reacted with shock. Military strategists realized that warfare had entered a new era, defined by overwhelming force and irreversible consequences. World War II ended soon after. Celebrations followed, flags were raised, soldiers returned home. But history rarely shows what came after the silence. Survivors carried physical and psychological scars for the rest of their lives. Veterans struggled with memories they could never erase. Political leaders bore the weight of their decisions away from the public eye. The end of the war did not bring lasting peace. Instead, it opened the door to a new kind of conflict. The Cold War emerged, a war defined not by constant battles, but by fear, ideology, and the ever-present threat of total destruction. Former allies became rivals, military doctrines were rewritten. Nuclear deterrence, technological competition, and global surveillance all traced back to that moment. Military history is often told through maps and timelines, but what it rarely captures is the human weight behind those decisions. The pressure, the doubt, and the realization that there was no perfect solution. That's why real war stories matter, because war is not just strategy. It's not just victory or defeat. It's the sum of decisions made under extreme pressure by real people with irreversible consequences. Soldiers followed orders given far from the battlefield. Civilians suffered consequences they never chose. Leaders made decisions they could never undo. Understanding war means looking beyond the battles. It means understanding how wars end and what comes after. Violence is never abstract. It affects real lives, real families, entire generations. The decisions made at the end of World War II redefined the limits of human power and shaped international relations for decades. The world tried to prevent anything like it from happening again. New laws were written, new alliances were formed, and yet the shadow of Hiroshima and Nagasaki never disappeared. For many, the war never truly ended. It lived on in memories, in silence, in stories that were never told. This channel exists to bring those stories to light, to go beyond simplified narratives, to show what really lies behind the wars that shaped our world. Because in the end, this isn't just a story about war. It's a story about people, about pressure, about the moment humanity crossed a line it could never fully return from. History remembers the end of the war, but it often forgets the weight of the decision that ended it, the silence before it, and the world that was forever changed after. And that's exactly why these stories must be told and never forgotten. If you're into real war history, subscribe now and follow the channel, because some of the most important stories ever told are the ones most people have never truly understood.